Around the world in 80 days.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Picture This, where movies are pictured, best pictured, if you will. We have been going through the years of the upset, and this is another year that is kind of considered an upset in some ways. Not the biggest upset, though. We'll talk about it at the time. It was not as big an upset as it is, I think, now. And just as the night was progressing, it's one of those rare upsets where the movie that won was predicted to win, but as the night was going, people were like, is this actually going to win? And then it did. So it was a kind of fun roller coaster ride of an Oscar night. But I am joined by my partner in crime here, quite literally in crime with that hat. I'm just kidding. No. I like the blue. The blue's nice. The blue with the green. Chad, how you doing? Congrats on the postseason. We're both making it there, so it'll be a fun battle. One battle after another, if you will. Chad, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Not only did we both make it in, but we're playing each other for the right to continue to be in the postseason. So I'm very excited and also nervous, like you are, to see if we can squeak through. But just for my team to not have been great the past few years, I'm glad to see them finally get back in there. So we'll have to see, and it'll be really fun between us. Just the fun banter and
and that's the thing, the banter, you're only getting a little bit because I'm overseas, so you're getting to take advantage of the fact that I won't be there to consistently nag you about it.
Right. I'll get a very delayed God damn it, or haha.
But speaking of God damn it, a lot of people were very upset by this upset of 1956. Some people were very thrilled, and I figured because I'm quite literally going around the world, and it's been about the 80-day mark. It's actually been closer to like the 100-day mark at this point, but we hit the 80-day mark in this past month that I've been at sea, so I thought this was a great opportunity to do Around the World in 80 Days. It's a film I've never seen, was excited to check out. Actually, all 5 of these films are all 5 huge epics that I had never seen, so I'm very, very excited to finally talk about them. I was very excited to watch them. Some of them I'm excited to talk about, some of them I'm not as hyped on, but I'm very excited to at least talk about it because, the discussion with Chad is always my favorite thing. But let me tell you what those 5 movies are really quick. Around the World in 80 Days, Friendly Persuasion, Giant, The King and I, and The 10 Commandments. Now, normally I would put the posters on the screen, but Chad did it for me with the Blu-rays and DVDs, so I'm going to leave it at that. I will zoom in on him so you can see that. I kind of like that way of doing it now. Maybe we'll do that in the future. Do you have the ones for next month? Do you have the ones for next month ready to go for at the end of the show when I tease them? I'm kidding. I'm very much kidding. But Chad, let's jump right in because I am overseas, so I'm gonna try to we're gonna try to get this done as efficiently as possible. And because we're talking about 5 movies that in totality take up about 12 hours of a day, if you were to watch them back to back to back, maybe even more, then we definitely need to get cracking. So, Chad, tell us about 1956. Obviously, neither of us were born or alive then, not even a thought. Our parents might have just been born or not even born yet, but let's talk about what the world was up to in 1956, Chad.
Yeah, real quick though, I will say the slate, the length of it, if we both seem very tired, it's because man, those films were long. Some of those DVDs had 2 DVDs. Oof. That I had to put the second one in after an intermission. History of 1956. Italy hosts the Winter Olympics. Austria and Israel established diplomatic relations. Elvis enters the music charts in America for the first time with Heartbreak Hotel. Norma Jean Mortensen changes her name to Marilyn Monroe. Morocco declares its independence from France. The Broadway musical My Fair Lady opens in New York City. Tunisia gains independence from France. Marty is awarded Best Picture, and Herb Stemple totally remembered that fact during a quiz show. Pakistan becomes the first Islamic republic. Videotape, an early form of video cassette tape, is first demonstrated. Grace Kelly marries the Prince of Monaco. Heavyweight boxing champion Rocky Marciano retires. General Electric introduces the first snooze alarm clock, which we didn't get to take advantage of today. The flag of the United States Army is formally dedicated. The hard disk drive is invented by an IBM team, which we're using a lot today. New York Yankees baseball pitcher, I put this fact in for Dylan. Baseball pitcher Don Larson throws the only perfect game ever thrown in the World Series, and that's still true today.
Yes, it is.
The Wizard of Oz is the first film over 90 minutes to be aired uncut. In the evening. Wait, I forgot. Oh no.
On
uncut
television?
On television in the United States. Oh, aired in one single evening, so not in like parts. Okay,
episodically. Yeah.
Dwight D. Eisenhower wins the presidency. The United States Supreme Court decides it to be illegal to segregate buses in Montgomery, Alabama, back when the Supreme Court was actually doing things to help the country. Sorry for that spicy take. Summer Olympics is held in Australia. African-American Floyd Patterson wins the World Heavyweight Boxing Championship. The 1956 Bush Terminal explosion happens in Brooklyn, New York. And then the $1 Million Quartet get together at Sun Studio for the first and last time in history, featuring Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and Johnny Cash. Damn, what a concert.
Yeah, that is quite a concert. I actually like that you brought up the TV fact with Wizard of Oz, because this is something I want to talk about with the slate in general, and we'll get to like all the other stuff in just a sec. But it's important to note that the reason the slate is so long. I mean, I did look at the runtime; it's 14 hours and 33 minutes. This slate. And the reason it is so long, all of these are like epics. They're, the shortest one is 2 hours and 13 minutes, and even that one is a big epic musical. All 5 of these are so long, so big, so epic, and I think it's because at the time, this is also the time where like TV is really surging and people are really wanting to get interest back in the theaters. It's kind of what we're going through a little bit today with like the streaming thing of like wanting to make sure people still want to see it exhibited in the biggest way possible. So the movies they were making were movies that could not be put on TV. It was like, you know what? You're used to TV. Well, guess what? There's still movies coming out and we're going to make them as big, as grand, as epic as possible. So you have to see them on the big screen. And it was even more daunting when Wizard of Oz was on TV, because it was like, oh, shoot, now we can put these on TV too. So we need to make something that, just looks so good that you don't even want to watch it on TV, or that you want to watch on TV a few months later, or a few years later, I guess, is what they did back in the time. But I just think it's really interesting that like TV was the driving force behind Hollywood kind of embracing the epic in the 50s and 60s, because after this, we would see for a whole decade or two later, we'd be getting these epics and epics and epics. And it wasn't until like the 70s where the epics kind of fizzled out. And then the 80s is when we kind of got back to that more like independent, smaller, more intimate cinema with like Ordinary People and Raging Bull and those smaller movies. But you think about it, like the 50s, 60s, and 70s were all huge movies coming out back to back to back. I mean, like Sound of Music comes out in the 60s, and then you've got like all those big movie musicals. You got the 70s with Godfather. Like there's so many big epics. And I think a lot of that is due to, TV really taking over and people being like, okay, well, we can't just have these like little personal dramas. Like we need to really go big or go home. And that's how you end up with a 14-hour slate.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no comment.
Yep. Do you have any births or deaths or?
Yeah. Sorry.
Cool. Sorry, no, I didn't want to steal your thunder there, but
no worries. Yeah, a lot of good births. Tom Hanks, Bryan Cranston, Bob Saget, Larry Bird, Mel Gibson, Carrie Fisher, Luis Guzman, Keith David, Kim Cattrall, Joe Montana. I said Joe Montana. It's like that's a Waterboy book. Let's see where I threw myself off. Jackie Harry, Gina Davis, Richard Kind, LaToya Jackson, Imelda Staunton, Dylan's favorite Harry Potter actor, Eric Roberts, William Fichtner, Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace, Gary Cole, Randy Rhoads, Christoph Waltz, David Alan Grier, Sinbad, Bruce Greenwood. That was Sinbad the comedian, not the pirate. Alan Ruck, Nathan Lane, Cheryl Lee Ralph, Rex Lynn, Clifton Powell, Kenny G, Ann Dowd, and Andy Garcia.
Wow. Well, quite a lineup. I mean, the fact that Bryan Cranston was only the second name you named, that Tom Hanks had to come before, I was like, that's when you know it's a good year. Bert's when
Oh, yeah.
Bryan Cranston is not the number one,
I
the most notable name.
I do not rank these. So
Oh, I thought it was in notable order, but yeah,
no.
you're right. You're right. Yeah. But I mean, Tom Hanks is like the biggest name I think of that
Yeah.
bunch.
Oh
So
yeah.
the fact that it was first, I was like, oh, okay. And then Bryan Cranston, I'm like, whoa, there's even more than that. What about some albums, Chad? Any albums?
Well, I
Or
got
sort of
two
deaths?
deaths.
Sorry, deaths. Okay.
Just two deaths. Jackson Pollock and Bela Lugosi. It's
Oh, okay.
close to horror month, so Bela
Yes.
Lugosi. Yep, there you go.
Yes, that was my best. What is it? When he played
Dracula.
Night of Outer Space. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. When he's just kind of walking around. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen that
great.
one yet.
Yes. It kind of parodied in Ed Wood, of course.
Yeah.
If you've seen that. But yeah, great. What about some albums, Chad?
Yep, a few albums here. We got, speaking of Elvis Presley by Elvis Presley, Songs for Swingin' Lovers by Frank Sinatra, Pithecanthropus erectus by Charles Mingus, Ella and Louise by Ella Fitzgerald. Oh, it's Ella and Louis. And Louis Armstrong. It's like Louis.
Louis Armstrong.
It's Louis. Louis Armstrong. Ellington at Newport by Duke Ellington and his orchestra. Lady Sings the Blues by Billie Holiday. Elvis by Elvis Presley. He just named his albums his name. I guess everyone did at this point. Ella Fitzgerald sings the Cole Porter Songbook by Ella Fitzgerald. J.S. Bach, The Goldberg Variations, 1956, by Glenn Gould. And The Wildest by, this is either Luis, or Louis Prima.
Louis Prima. The character King Louis from Jungle Book is based off of and voiced by Louis Prima. So there you go. Fun fact. Jungle Book would come a few years later, I believe, 2 or 3 years later after this. I think 1959 or 60. But yes, the Academy Awards, going to the films of 1956. Some films are left on the cutting room floor. I didn't really have a bunch. I only jotted down like 2 or 3. I put down Carousel just because I'm like, why is that the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical that makes it King and I over Carousel? We'll talk about it in a sec. The Searchers, the big one, that's like one of the big westerns of the time. And then The Killing, which is not Stephen Colbert. Damn, it's early. Stanley Kubrick's first film. What did I say? Stephen Colbert. So those are the only 3 that I was like, okay, those are notable enough to bring up. And then I know a lot of people love War and Peace, but I've never seen that one. But Chad, did you have any notable films for 1956?
Yeah, I just have a few. I have Forbidden Planet, Godzilla, King of Monsters, or King of the Monsters. And then for Best Picture worthy, I have Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a truly great horror film.
Yeah, so those are some of the movies from 1956. But looking at the actual Oscars themselves, I mean, obviously precursors, we only have one. It's the Golden Globes. I mean, the BAFTAs was existing, but none of these films got BAFTA nominated, which is kind of surprising because I feel like the Brits would like a few of these, maybe.
Yeah.
But, David Niven's in one of them, but, they weren't interested in any of them. But as I said, like Around the World in 80 Days wasn't really necessarily an upset because it was the second highest grossing film of the year. It was the winner of the Golden Globe. So was The King and I. But it's more so just like looking at the night of Oscars because Around the World in 80 Days didn't win director or any acting nominations. It didn't even get nominated for any acting. And no real film has ever really done that. Very few have. It was only like, I don't know, 1 in 6 films ever have ever gotten nominated or have ever won without a directing win or acting nominations. I believe Chariots of Fire did it again in 1981, but it's very rare. So I think when the night was going, I mean, Around the World in 80 Days had the most nominations next to Giant. Giant had the most nominations, though. Giant had 1 director, so a lot of people are like, well, Giant's probably going to win because it had the acting nominations. It had the win for Best Director. But then Around the World in 80 Days did win. And you know what? The 10 Commandments was the highest grossing film of the year and probably the biggest hit. So it was really one of those like 3-handers where like a lot of people were like, well, it's probably going to be the highest grossing film, 10 Commandments. It might be the most feel-good film Around the World in 80 Days, or it's going to be Giant, which just has the most accolades on its side. But kind of an upset, kind of not. I think it's one of those things that by the time it was announced, like everyone was kind of like, okay, yep, that makes sense. That's what we thought it was going to be. Even though if you had watched the ceremony, you were probably thinking, oh, maybe it's not going to win. It didn't win director. It hasn't gotten any acting nominations. So it's one of those weird upsets, but it's not necessarily a like huge upset in the fact that there weren't like a bunch of pundits predicting anything else. There weren't really pundits at the time anyway. So it's kind of one of those things where we have to kind of just infer that it was an upset on the night just based on the way the night was going. But as for the night itself, I mean, this is a very notable Oscars. It's the first ever award for Best International Feature Film. And back then, they only kind of gave an award. They didn't nominate anything. They just said, this is our Best International Feature. And at the time, it was the very first one was Fellini's La Strada, which came out in 1956, was nominated or was given the win basically for Best International Feature, the very first one. I think in the future someday it might be fun to go through at least the winners of Best International Feature here. It might be fun to watch through all of them. That would be a cool experiment someday in the future. This was the first year where all 5 Best Picture nominees were in color, which is huge because they were also all big epics. And we would see that kind of become a trend more and more, especially throughout the 60s and then 70s. And then kind of, again, by the 80s, we'd get some more black and white films in the mix. This kind of set a trend for like these big epics winning, because after this you would see like Bridge on the River Kwai, Gigi, Ben-Hur, all these big 3-hour long color epics win. So this kind of really did set a precedent for what the Academy was looking for now as opposed to what they were looking for before. This was also a very interesting year because Robert Rich won the Best Original Story category. Robert Rich is the pseudonym for Dalton Trumbo, because this is the time where he was blacklisted. So he won under his blacklisted name and accepted it as his blacklisted name, Robert Rich, which was really, really cool. James Dean also became only the first actor to receive his second posthumous nomination for acting. So he basically died before 2 of his movies came out. That's how short his career was and how quick it was that he passed away, and he had already had East of Eden and this Giant become nominated for him. So it was
apparently he died like something like 4 days after finishing shooting Giant.
Yes, which makes insane. Yeah, which makes it eerie too. We'll talk about it based on what the final shots are in that movie. But that was kind of it. The Searchers not nominated for a single nomination, which is kind of something that even Wikipedia was like, WTF, because it's one of the most influential Westerns of all time. So just worth noting. But that's kind of it for the awards. I played the clip at the top. You see, what's his name? Michael Todd winning the producer award for Best Picture for Around the World in 80 Days. He runs back and he kisses his wife, Elizabeth Taylor, on the mouth. Elizabeth Taylor, I believe he was her 3rd or 4th husband. I can't remember. She had like 7 or 8. But Michael Todd, he runs back, kisses her, and then goes on stage, gets his Oscar. And sadly, a few months after the Academy Awards, passes away in a plane crash. And that is Elizabeth Taylor's one and only non-divorce. That's a fun fact. It's a kind of morbid fact, but Mike Todd is, we talked about, I think when it was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, how she had just lost her husband. That is her husband, Mike Todd. Right. So Mike Todd only produced a few films, if only, it might have only produced 1 film, but he Around the World in 80 Days was the first film he produced, and is a film that won him the Big Gold, even though he wasn't around much longer after that. And he got the kiss from Elizabeth Taylor, which is really the true prize of the night. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about Around the World in 80 Days. This is a perfect segue since we just talked about Mike Todd, but let's talk about Mike Todd's Around the World in 80 Days.
Yeah, we don't know if it can actually be done, but, watch the movie and find out.
I've been around some of the world. I've been around some of the world in 80 days. I'm just a Caribbean, but I've done it.
You got to get back by 8:45 p.m. on the 21st.
Okay.
Wait, no, it's past the 21st. Sorry, Dylan, you're already late. Directed by Michael Anderson. Written by James Poe, John Farrow, and S.J. Perelman. Cinematography by Lionel Linden. Music by Victor Young. Starring David Niven, Kenton Fluss, Shirley MacLaine, Robert Newton, Charles Boyer, Cesar Romero, Peter Lorre, Frank Sinatra, Buster Keaton, John Carradine, and Edward R. Murrow. Synopsis. An English gentleman and his French servant attempt to travel the length of the earth in 80 days. Based on the 1873 novel Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne.
Here you go. Chad, have you ever read this book, or have you ever read any Jules Verne? No. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where like they always talk about his books, like Journey to the Center of the Earth and Around the World in 80 Days. It's like these big like literature classics, but I've never read it, so I don't know how faithful an adaptation of this is. But as I said, it is kind of Michael Todd's movie more than it is Michael Anderson's movie, just because he was, the producer, and this was like a big like production. I think that's something we see a lot of with the epics of this time. It's like it's less about the director's vision and more about the producer's vision for the studio. Like we're gonna make this big Jules Verne epic. We're gonna go around the world. We're gonna film on location. We're gonna kind of make these big sweeping large shots and the balloons and the bullfighting and all that stuff. And it really became more of a production than it was just like a directorial vision, which makes sense why Michael Anderson didn't win the director award here. But it is going to be interesting to see when it is more of a production versus more of a directorial vision versus a blending of both. And then when it is a blending of both, that director doesn't get nominated, which we'll talk about. But it's just very interesting because this does feel a little bit like we have this very popular book. Let's just put it to the screen and like make a lot of money, sell this as this big spectacle. It kind of reminds me of The Greatest Show on Earth in that way. I think this is a little bit better. But it does feel like it's kind of selling a spectacle more than any of the other films in this slate, despite all these slate films being epic and having a large scale to it. One of them's literally called Giant. But I think this is the one that kind of most feels just like kind of your, I don't want to say run of the mill because there are still very impressive techniques made to shoot all this stuff. But it does kind of feel like, this is the one where this is the studio's film. This is the crowd pleaser. This is kind of the palate cleanser amongst all these other epics that are a little denser, which we also talk about with other slates where it's like, this is the light one. That's why this one won, like Greatest Show on Earth, American in Paris. We run into this a lot. But I'm curious to see what you think of Around the World in 80 Days because I'll admit I don't have a lot to say on this one, but I'm curious what you have to say, Chad.
I mean, I'm very similar. I feel like, yeah, no, I mean, you already said a lot about it, to be honest, like, and I think a lot accurately where I didn't even make the connection between like this and the greatest show on earth, but it does feel kind of like the same kind of movie where there's like a gimmick, but, the gimmick part is, kind of cool sometimes where it feels like some of like the shots that they have are cool. So it's like technically like interesting a lot of the times where like, it's hard to describe the shot sometimes, but it's like, where the shot's like moving and stuff's like kind of like when it's like on a train.
Yeah, like a tracking shot almost.
Yeah, kind of like a stuff that you would see like in like The Brutalist with like driving on the highway and stuff like
a first
that.
person or a tracking.
Yeah, you got it.
All that. Yeah, all that cinematography lingo. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like one like when they're in the jungle and it's like them all like on the frame and they're moving through the trees and stuff. So stuff like that I think is actually kind of cool. But like from like a narrative perspective, it's very simple, even though it's a pretty long movie and everything, and not like a ton of like interesting characters. It's just like one of those where it's like they got to go around the world in 80 days. They got to make it back. Oh, they didn't make it back. Oh, but did they make it back? Kind of a deal. And it's like, I feel like I've seen that movie like a lot, but there's not a lot of like depth in the movie. It's just kind of like, that's what it is. It's like, they're just going around and, I don't know. Is some of it kind of insensitive? I'm not sure. Like I'm trying to like figure that out because of, the Native American stuff and, them being like, well, these ones are peaceful because they have the peace pipe. The other ones, I'm not so sure. And, just going around to all these different cultures and showing like maybe like really cool things about them or just the things that are like noteworthy, like, dancing and bullfighting and, stuff like that and getting into these crazy predicaments and, and stuff. And I think sometimes it is kind of funny where they have like certain like funny little gags and stuff like, the one guy, the valet, he goes to try and like, do a bullfight with this, random bull. And they're like, that's a sacred animal. What are you doing? And they chase them and, stuff like that. So, I mean, you got like little fun gags and things like that. It's not enjoyable, but I do think there's just a lot of like sequences that just go on about like showing the places that they travel to. It feels almost like a travel documentary a lot of the times, more so than just a big narrative film. So I'm not sure why this one, other than the fact that like you said that's just kind of like what they were doing around this time a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's also because it's like, this is kind of the more feel good of the five. I mean, like there's a little bit in King and I and a little bit in Friendly Persuasion that like is kind of lighthearted at times, but they are still heavier subject matters. It is still a dense movie. Whereas this one doesn't really feel dense. Like I'm never watching it. I'm like, whoa, this is a lot to absorb. It's like very easy to watch, easy breezy, which
Yeah,
I kind of appreciate, but also at the same time, I'm like, it does make it seem the most forgettable. And I do hate that
yeah,
about it because it does, it could lend itself to some of these big like cinematic moments. And I do like what you said about like, is it insensitive? Is it not? Because obviously it's the 50s. So everything is insensitive and everything isn't insensitive. If you know what I mean,
right,
it's like they do things that just how the culture was. So it's like, but you shouldn't get a free pass for it nowadays. But
right.
at the same time, it's like, I mean, it just the culture was different. But yeah, I think when you are going around the world to different cultures, seeing different walks of life, there does have that tendency to be like cultural appropriation or just kind of like mocking of a culture. Like when he does the bullfight thing, like is that mockery that he's like a buffoon at it, or is it kind of like an endearing thing because he's trying to understand these different cultures? I think they could have gone further and like really absorbed that aspect of it and like tried to make it a more cultured thing, make it about kind of trying to find these like different walks of life around the world. But that's just like a different film altogether. um or build up the anticipation of like, we have to get back, we have to get back, and make it feel a little bit more suspenseful, because I think that's the thing is you don't really get that until the very end, where it's like, oh no, we got to get back, we got to get back, and then like the gag of, oh, we made it late, oh wait, no, the clocks went back because of the dateline. I like that little gag, but I almost
Yeah,
wish there was a little bit more urgency, because you spend so much time in each of these places. It's almost like the multiverse of madness thing, where it's like you have the multiverse and you stay in one universe for like 2 hours. um it's kind of that idea of like, well, why are we still in Spain? Like, let's move. And I think that's the thing
yeah,
is it could do a better job. Maybe if it was just a tighter runtime, but because it's a big runtime and you're spending a lot of time in these different places, it does feel a little drawn out and dragged out, to where it doesn't feel like there's that urgency to get back, to get back in 80 days, which is the whole conceit of the movie. So I think it's just one of those structural issues. I do think it's well shot. I actually do really love some of the comedic gags. I love the one where they're passing that snowy mountain and the guy just kind of like scoops up some of the snow. Like
I was
those
gonna
little
bring that
things.
up.
Yeah, those little things are so cute and so fun. And I wish it had just gone full-fledged like slapstick, or like really had a little bit more dramatic suspense. I think the thing is it kind of plays it safe in the middle, to where it just feels like it's just kind of trying to cater to everyone and just be this like family adventure. And I think it loses track of like having actual like propulsion behind it, if it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. The only real note that I wrote down was bro got some snow from the top of the Alps to keep his wine cold.
Yeah,
Like
I think that's iconic. Yeah.
it's really really fun, really funny.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
true. Like if you're out in a snowy area, like sometimes they have like those hot tubs in the middle of like the, snowy areas, because like
yeah,
you want to stay warm, and you have like a glass of wine, but you put it on that's the thing, you put it in the snow. Like that's a real thing, I guess.
yeah.
So yeah.
But if you happen to be in a hot air balloon and you're passing by, just grab some snow off that mountain. Um, but yeah, I don't know how like to make this movie like a little bit better. Like I know they have like where they pass through and like you got this funeral pyre thing what the culture's doing, and they're about to burn the dude's wife, who's
Mhm.
alive with him,
Yeah.
which I'm like, Jesus. But they save her, and
Mhm.
then she kind of becomes like the love interest and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's kind of strange, just like hey, come with us,
Yeah.
for a better life.
Yeah,
um
yeah, and again, if they had like gone further into making that like a funny bit, like maybe everywhere they go, they're like, come with us," and then they have like 20 people in the air
I was
balloon or
just thinking
something.
about that. It's kind
Like
of
yeah,
like Bill and Ted's.
yeah, yeah, like that's the thing. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people have done this formula just better. I think they've kind of realized that this is such a simple story. And I guess it's
Yeah,
better on the book because it's like more descriptive. You're able to actually like, really make people imagine these places. But when you can see these places, you've seen it for 2 minutes and then you don't need to see it for 20 minutes. It's like, okay,
yeah.
I don't need 18 more minutes. I've seen it for two. And I think that's the problem. But I do think a lot of
Mhm.
things have done this better. Like, as you said, Bill and Ted's. I think like even Family Guy has done something like this better. So again, and that's not to diss this movie. It's a Best Picture winning film, even though we've dissed plenty on the show. And I do think based on my ranking, this will be a bit of a diss. But
Yeah,
yeah, like I just don't think it's the best version of the story, but it is the first
yeah,
version of the story. So at least it's a good, hopefully a good interpretation of the book at the very least.
yeah.
Yeah. Around the World in 80 Days, though, is nominated for 8 Oscars for 80 days. Wins 5. So it did win a lot. I mean, it was one of those things that, like, it's not really an upset, even though nowadays people will consider an upset because it's probably the least talked about of these five, or at least the least like recognized of these five. But what it wins for picture, wins for adapted screenplay, wins for best musical score, dramatic or comedy, wins for best cinematography, color, and wins for best film editing. But it is also nominated for director for Michael Anderson, best art direction, and best costume design, color. But that was a grand epic. Now we go to a different kind of epic where it is still long. It is still about 3 hours, but it is a little bit more of a personal epic, a little bit more of a familial drama, but told in a more epic sense. But a much friendlier film than Around the World in 80 Days. That is actually not true. But it's in the title, and that is Friendly Persuasion. Chad, tell us about Friendly Persuasion.
Friendly Persuasion, directed by William Wyler, written by Michael Wilson, cinematography by Ellsworth Fredericks, music by Dmitry Tiomkin, starring Gary Cooper, Dorothy McGuire, Anthony Perkins, Marjorie Main, Richard Ayer, Robert Middleton, Phyllis Love, Peter Mark Richmond, Walter Catlett, Richard Hale, and John Smith. Synopsis. So there is an actual person named John Smith, apparently. Synopsis. A Quaker family's pacifistic beliefs are tested during the American Civil War. Based on the 1945 novel Friendly Persuasion by Jessamine West.
Yes. So I kind of joked that this is a friendlier film than Around the World in 80 Days, but it's really not, because it is heavy. I mean, there's a lot of interesting, heavy conflict going on. You know, I think pacifism is just such an interesting conversation to be had. But I love when movies are set in a very,
tumultuous time.
Yes, tumultuous time where like those views are really tested. Because like we can say we're pacifists, but like, you know, we are not in the circumstances, well, hopefully never, but maybe, I don't want to speak anything into existence, where we have to like be in the midst of fight and have that moral conflict. But it's also not Hacksaw Ridge. It's not like, you know, you're not showing bodies blowing up all around you.
It feels like Hacksaw Ridge at times.
It does.
Especially when, sorry to interrupt, but especially when Anthony Perkins looks exactly like Andrew Garfield.
Yes, that's a very good point. I didn't even think of that. That's actually a very, very, very good point. But yeah, like I think it's like Hacksaw Ridge is just like bodies blowing up all around this battlefield, and you know he's obviously a pacifist saving him through that. But I've always thought that film is just so oxymoronic in the way it preaches pacifism, but then has these like really gruesome, grueling war sequences. But what I like about this film is that it is about pacifism, and it feels like it has that urgency without needing to show the violence or like glorify the violence or, you know, kind of go there. It still has those conversations and still feels those stakes and feels that tension without having to necessarily like really, you know, commit to showing it, which is really interesting, which is kind of different than any film you will ever see, especially because this is still an epic, but it doesn't feel like an epic. It doesn't feel grand in a way. But I'm really curious what you have to say about this, Jack, because I know we're both pacifists. We both talked about it. Or at least, you know, against violence in general. But what do you think of Friendly Persuasion? I know I just got the ball rolling on a bunch of different thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts before I dive deeper, because I do have a lot of thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's good. I do like this film. I think it's very interesting. I didn't know that much about Quakers going into it, other than that they make oats, maybe.
Yep, I mean, true.
I don't know. Do they? But to see like just like their whole like thing is like their religion is based around not only nonviolence, but you know, so there's like a like what I consider to be kind of a good part of the religion is that, you know, not to like diss on Quakers. I don't even know if Quakers are still a thing these days.
I don't know.
Or if they've morphed into something else, but you know, I don't want to like, you know, diss anybody's religion or anything like that. But then you have other stuff where they kind of, you know, are anti-music and anti, like, I guess, expression and stuff like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right where the idea of like, you know, pacifism and it being tested is just like super interesting, because I think we all kind of have that inner struggle. Like you can be like, you know, hardlined, you know, non-violence ever. But then it's like, you know, what happens when you're what happens if you have to do self-defense?
Right.
Like, some, you know, some characters have to do in the movie where, you know, it comes down to someone's going to like kill and eat your pet, your family pet.
Right.
What are you going to do at that point?
Yeah.
Are you going to hit them with the broom or not? And and when you're like so hard lined on something, it being tested is going to be like a really interesting kind of thing. And that's why I like, this movie a lot, is because you get to see many different, parts, where they're tested. And it gets really emotional when you have, right in the heart of a war, brother fighting brother and stuff. And, you even come down to the idea of, what do you teach your kids? And, with the little boy who's like, George, Gary Cooper, leaving to go make sure his son wasn't killed. And then his littlest son, he's like, the son's like, go kill me a Johnny Reb. And then, he's like, don't never talk about a man's life like that. And I loved like the weight of that, and like, the idea of that. Cause like in like movies today, a lot of the times, they don't have the weight on like what it means to actually like take a life. You'll just have like, faceless people get killed and movies left and right and action films and stuff like that. And in this one, it's like, even just like talking about killing someone, it's like, that's just, where's your humanity? And I feel like, in today's like government and, stuff like that, there's a lot of not that anymore. Where you have, I'm not going to praise like, Ronald Reagan's administration or anything like that. There's a lot of bad stuff there, I'm sure. I don't know history that well, but this was his favorite actor, and he loved movies like this.
He like showed this to some enemy or some opposing force to like try to make peace relations or whatever. Like,
right?
This is a big film in that sense, and that's why it is so epic, even though it doesn't have the traditional stylings of an epic.
Yeah, but I'm like just thinking about like, you would think like the current administration that we have is like, oh, you don't like them because they're Republican. It's like, no, this is like an entirely different thing. Like back then, in the Ronald Reagan times, the very least, if I disagreed with like their policies and stuff, they still liked movies like this that shows like what a human life is worth. And now, current administration is more like, we don't really care about human life. We don't care what happens to people and stuff. So I think that's why movies like this are really important, because, and done well, like you said, like, we'll get into the Hacksaw Ridge debate at a later time.
My least favorite movies of all time.
Wow. But, with this one, it is done really well. And I love like the emotional moments between like, with Anthony Perkins, who I think is amazing in this movie, just like trying to figure out what his life is going to be, and should he, defy his parents and go fight, or stay and then just feel like a piece of shit because you're not helping, and a lot of people around you are dying, or maybe people are going to come. In hindsight, maybe they should have been there to defend their farm, but it is what it is. But yeah, those emotional moments, and that the one actress, I passed by it. Is it Dorothy McGuire, the mom? And she, she has like many moments where she turns towards the camera, her back on stuff that's happening, and she's got tears in her face, and I'm like, and she's perfected that shot of her crying at the camera.
No, I do really like this one. I think it's one of those things where like all these films are big, long, epic in some way, but this is the one that feels still the most grounded. It feels like the one that is the most refreshing, even though it's not the most fun. Like I'd say Around the World in 80 Days is like the palate cleanser, but this is more of a palate cleanser in the sense that everything is so long, so dense, so rich, and this one is as well, but it's presented in a lighter manner. I think it's also just because the Quakers have a lighter way of life. Like they're just a little bit more delicate, a little more free, and just not wholesome necessarily. I don't really know the word I'm looking for. Maybe in a way wholesome, but just the way that their style of life, it's a little bit more
simple,
comforting, simple. There you go. Not me trying to find a word in it being simple, but that's exactly what it is. It's simple, and I like that. It's simple with the stakes, and I think that's what this movie better than any other movie about pacifism I've seen has done, is doing it in a simple way that feels important and has stakes, but doesn't glorify anything about its topic, and also doesn't pass judgment on those who disagree. You know, it's like you said, it's willing to open up that conversation, even though there are people with different views. Like, what are you going to do in this circumstance is going to be different than what everyone else does. You know, it's going to vary person by person, but we're at least going to talk about it. We're at least going to look at it as a moral dilemma, because it is a dilemma. It is something that requires thought. It's something that you can't just say this is the right or wrong answer to. And I know that's a very basic premise, but sometimes you need that premise because clearly it doesn't stick for some people. But again, like, this is not a film I'm going to write home about just because it is. I mean, you all didn't see the clip of Chad and his son that we took a pause for, but I'll put it at the end of this video. That's where Chad's hat went. You know, he got. You said you watched this with your son for a little while, and then your son kind of got bored in the beginning. I kind of did too. I think it's one of those films because it is so slice of life and it is long. It does kind of get a little bit boring, but I think it's also in service of showing that plain and simple life to emphasize the point of their pacifism. So I think it works in effect, even though it's not the one I'm going to watch again soonest. It's not the one I'm going to write home about or praise to no end. But I do think this is a recommendation. This is like a solid 3.5 star film that I would definitely recommend for its values and for its, you know, messaging. And I think it does its messaging very well. I mean, there's really not much else to say. We've talked about Anthony Perkins. He's great. This is also, I think, his first role or one of his first roles. And he gets Oscar nominated already. I mean, he's also in an era where they're trying to fill the shoes of James Dean, which we'll talk about very soon. But, you know, he was kind of talked about in the same breath as James Dean, is like, well, how are we ever going to find a young movie star like James Dean? Well, Anthony Perkins, there's a lot of great people on the rise, and he was one of the names that they brought up, which is very interesting. And one last point I'll make really quick is that I think it's very interesting. Anthony Perkins and we'll talk about Rock Hudson both being closeted actors as well. How that kind of aids in some of the theming of these films and just the way, you know, these films with these moral dilemmas. If you want to find queer coding, you can, because the actors also were kind of queer coded in that sense. So I think there's also something to say about that, where, like, you know, your religion wants you to say one thing, but you kind of believe something else just because this is kind of where you're feeling right. And there's some queer coding in that. I mean, that's kind of the superhero thing as well, of like not necessarily feeling like you belong in this space and you want to kind of take this by the reins or live this truth that you feel like is more truer to yourself or to your beliefs and to your values. It's about having one's values and one's independence and one's own way of thinking, even if it involves a dilemma, you know, moral quandary, if you will. So I just thought it was very interesting. But Anthony Perkins, great. I mean, this is 3 years before Psycho, 4 years. So he's about to become even huger from that. But yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that about Anthony Perkins. But yeah, that's very, very interesting.
Yes.
I like that you have like different, you know, layers of the film. Yeah, I mean, this it really reminded me of, like, you know, High Noon, because I mean, not just because of Gary Cooper, but because it's Gary Cooper struggling with like a moral dilemma of like what to do against incoming violence that's about to happen. And you know, so it makes sense that, you know, like Ronald Reagan would have like a lot of, because I mean, I imagine that's what he was dealing with as president. You know, a lot of moral dilemmas of when to do violence, when not, you know, and things like that. And, you know, a lot of these movies, strangely, seem pretty progressive, despite, you know, Ronald Reagan being, you know, not that. And, you know, I just love all of the instances of Gary Cooper in these movies just like deciding to put down the gun and like drop it, and like, you know, choosing to you get the pacifistic thing, the, you know, like when he could have killed that one guy who shot him, instead he goes, you know, I'm not going to kill you, leave, you know, kind of a deal. And the strength that takes, and I just I love stuff like that. And also, you know, I just forgot to mention a lot of the juxtaposition of, you know, their simple, quiet life, like you were talking about, against the more like loud and, you know, fun side, where it's like, you know, because you have like the different churches where you have the one that's really quiet and they're just all sitting there kind of in silence, I guess, praying. And then you have the other one that's like really like, yeah, you know, and they're having a fun time. And, you know, I love how they kind of like show the, like I was saying in the beginning, kind of like the I don't know if you want to frame it as positive and negative sides of the religion, of the simplicity of it, where the good part is that they are pacifistic, but then the other part is where they kind of like shun, like they kind of restrict a lot of stuff, and it's like that's where religion sometimes gets a little iffy, where it's like well, don't you want to experience all of life gives, but then when does that free expression and go into chaos and stuff. So I don't know, I feel like this movie just has a lot to say, but I do agree that there is some maybe some pacing issues and stuff like that. Still not as long as some of these other ones.
I mean, the next one we'll talk about is I not even the longest, but it's even longer. So that's the thing. I'm like, oh, now we got the long one coming up. I'm like, wait, no, we don't. The long one's at the end.
Yeah. And but I do like how this has a pretty happy ending too, though. Because
which is also different than, I mean, no, actually a lot of these have happy endings, but a lot of these just have darker endings, I would say. Even more hopeful endings, like even the next one we'll talk about, like it has a happy ending essentially, but it is still in the midst of a dark final act, whereas this one does end on a lighter note, which is good.
I mean, there's some rough stuff in this movie, but I like how like really nobody that you really like identify with in the movie dies, except for like the one guy's friend. But then it kind of wraps up to them the little boy telling his father that the Confederate soldiers, which I'm also glad that they make the Confederate soldiers the villains in the movie. They came to kind of take advantage of their farm, and then he makes fun of his wife for actually letting her violent side out a little bit. It's just hitting the guy in the head with a broom, so it's not really that big of a deal, but to her it was a lot. Exactly. She's so rigid in her beliefs. When he's about to bring in that piano or keyboard or whatever it is, and she's like, I'm gonna go sleep in the barn. It's just like wild.
I do think this has some of the better comedic beats as well, like because there's a lot of other movies that like try to marry some comedy, and some of them work, some of them don't. But this one definitely I think works at least more successfully even than Around the World in 80 Days, where it was boring, just a little bit more boring. Like I think this succeeds a little bit more in the tonal shifts, but alas. Friendly Persuasion, though, the Oscars, not the biggest fans. They didn't give it any awards. They did nominate it 6 times, though, for picture, for director for William Wyler, for supporting actor for Anthony Perkins, best adapted screenplay, song for Friendly Persuasion, the titular song, and then sound recording. But as I said, Anthony Perkins was kind of being compared, not as the next James Dean, but as a star that could become as much of a success as James Dean. And we did talk about the closeted parallels between Rock Hudson. So why not talk about a James Dean, Rock Hudson movie that's also really, really long, and also kind of a bit more of a family drama in a way. It's a little bit bigger than just one singular family, but definitely not as sweeping as Around the World in 80 Days, but still an epic nonetheless. But it is the epic Giant. Chad, tell us about Giant.
I don't think you get more epic than a film called Giant,
right?
Directed by George Stevens, written by Fred Guile and Ivan Moffat, cinematography by William C. Mellor, music by Dmitri Tiomkin, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, James Dean, Carol Baker, Jane Withers, Chill Wills, Mercedes McCambridge, Dennis Hopper, Sal Mineo, Rodney Taylor, Judith Evelyn, Earl Holliman, Robert Nichols, Paul Fix, and Alexander Scorby. Synopsis: a new love interest shakes things up back at the family ranch called Riata when a ranch hand strikes oil on his plot of land and becomes rich. Based on the 1952 novel Giant by Edna Ferber.
Yes. Now we talked about Place in the Sun, which was kind of the first of like a pseudo trilogy. I've heard that this is a trilogy with Shane and with A Place in the Sun for George Stevens. We talked about it back then. We were like, oh, we're gonna get to Giant really soon. I think it's more of like a thematic trilogy. Obviously, it's obviously not connected in any way, but just more so like these American epics about like, again, moral dilemmas and darkness in America, and how one can turn evil or in this case turn good and not be a racist piece of shit anymore. Very progressive. Yeah, watching this, I'm like, wow, it's oddly progressive for the time. But let's talk about Giant, Chad. I'll let you take the floor with this first. What do you think of Giant?
I really, really like Giant. I
Cool.
think Giant is great. Yeah, I think I like just like big epics when they're done well.
Yeah.
And I think this one just has so many different, just interesting themes and stuff going on. With this guy who's running the ranch. He wants to see his ranch be taken care of. He also wants companionship, so he finds a wife, brings her back home, and she's got to like try to fit in, but not take over what like his sister's doing and stuff like that. And I found her to kind of be like a pretty insufferable character. But then she dies pretty early
Yeah.
on.
And gets that Mahershala Ali Oscar nomination too for it. Yeah.
And then she kind of leaves the land to James Dean's character, which I was really looking forward to, because he had just a very short career, like a
Great
very
movie. Yeah.
small span of time. And then just I feel like that just adds so much weight. It's almost like Nirvana with Kurt Cobain. It's like some people will go, well, they didn't have like that big of a like long of a legacy. And it's like, yeah, but like think about the weight that puts on each of these albums and how influential and great those
Yeah.
albums were. Like it doesn't matter, like it's not about the quantity, it's about like the quality. I feel like with Giant here and James Dean, I just like put like so much weight on every like scene he's in. I just think he was just like freaking incredible in this movie. Going from this kind of like unassuming ranch hand to this like Citizen Kane level guy, and a rich guy, but like where you think that all of his problems are solved, but he's a deeply sad and tragic character in his own right. And then you have the ideas of Elizabeth Taylor's character coming in, seeing how things are with the men, how they treat women, and how they will take their kids and try to force stuff on them. But what happens when your wife is more progressive and she's like, why can't women come and be in these meetings? Like, what are you talking about? Kind of a deal. And challenging that. And then, with the kids just kind of being like, well, what if your kid doesn't want to ride horses? What if your kid doesn't want to run the ranch? What if your kid has interest in doing something else? Like, I understand that you really want your kid to do exactly what you want to do, but that's not how people work. You can't just, it's not a robot, it's a child, and they have their own dreams and desires, and you got to like, make sure that you support, like, build a supporting kind of system for them to grow up and, to follow their dreams and stuff like that, rather than trying to suppress it or, tell them what their dreams are and stuff. So I love a lot of these ideas. I love that scene where he, tries to, beat the shit out of the restaurant guy.
Oh my gosh, the diner scene. Oh yeah, the diner scene is just, I think, one of the greatest scenes we covered on the show. Like it's just so good. And at the end when he like kind of at the very end, that like cherry on top, the we can refuse service to anyone, like that is again, it's kind of the same thing as Friendly Persuasion. And I kind of look at this in the same breath, in the fact that like it's not the epic in the sense of like you're not traveling the globe, you're not doing this biblical epic. You're
Right.
not going to a different country, or it's America. It's a very homegrown story, but it feels so epic because there's a journey taken. There's big stakes, even if it's personal stakes, and the climax is really interesting. It's a diner fight, and I love that about this. I love that it builds to something that is so inconsequential for literally 99.9999% of that town. It's just the like 20 people in that diner who witness it, but that is life changing to those characters because it shows her how much he's grown. He has confirmed for himself how much he's grown and how much he's willing to go for the people he loves, and also the way he's changed. And then it shows the kind of evil under roots of this world and how things still won't change. Even if one person changes, it's going to take a long time
Oh
for
yeah.
everyone to get on board. It still is, we see immigration as a huge thing right now, and that's, this isn't even immigration. These are, American citizens, but it's really shameful to see the racism that goes on here, and I think you could definitely tie it to today. And I think that's the thing, is this film of any is just the most timeless. I feel like this is the one that still could
Yeah.
work today. It feels like what I hope, what conservatives look at Gone with the Wind as, is what I think this film is for liberals. It's like that kind of
Yeah.
big homegrown American epic, telling this big American love story over time, but also kind of like we said with Citizen Kane, like kind of showing the darkness as well in an authentic way, but also having progressive thoughts and allowing characters to grow, which I really like. It's not just a descent to madness, which James Dean has, but it's also this growth from Rock Hudson. I love how both are kind of going in opposite ends of one another, where earlier on Rock Hudson's kind of the one you kind of disagree with. James Dean's kind of the one who's like this young kind of farmhand that you really want to root for, this wide-eyed kid. He's kind of got a little crutch. You want to root for him. And he's also James Dean, so you're excited to see him in his final role. And then as the movie goes, it's like he slips into darkness and this guy rises and becomes a better version of himself. And I love that device. I think we don't see enough movies like that. Like a lot of these movies, even There Will Be Blood, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, which this has been compared to, is about this guy's descent. There's no come up, it's both these guys' descents. Whereas this one, it's really interesting to see that opposing rise and fall happening simultaneously, and seeing Elizabeth Taylor as this constant in the middle of it. I just think it's such a great storytelling device. And honestly, watching it, I was waiting for it to feel epic, but then at the end, you look back at it and it feels epic. It's one of those movies that doesn't hit you until afterwards, where it's like Around the World in 80 Days, 10 Commandments, from King and I, from the start, you're like, okay, this is an epic. Like the production design is huge, everything's big, everything's grand. This movie isn't big and grand in anything other than its themes. But then you look back and you realize just how massive it is, and how much it hits you, and how much it sits on your shoulders in a daunting way, which is what all a great epic should do,
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about the idea of, because right now what we're facing, I love to compare stuff like this to today, like we've been doing, like, trying
Yeah.
to figure out like what we can learn still from older movies like this, where people go, why watch older movies? Because there's so many lessons that we still haven't learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea of what you were talking about like, Gone with the Wind is the, maybe the big conservative movie that, and this is maybe the more progressive. It's just because today what we're doing is trying to figure out what the fight is between like the soul of America and what America stands for. And I feel like with this movie, you really can have like the idea of, we're America, we stand for, the good of man, the rights of everyone to, be free and live their own life and pursue their own dreams, and the pursuit of liberty and happiness and, stuff. And that's what America stands for. And then like, the idea of like, oh yeah, but not those people over there. Not them. They're different. They don't belong here, kind of a deal. And it's like, well, you were great before you came up with the but. And it's like, well, and I mean, that's why I love, parts in this movie with like, Elizabeth Taylor coming in and being that progressive voice, because, not that people can't change on their own, but sometimes you need like a catalyst. And I feel like she is that, where she's like, she goes and, finds these, sick people who are not white. So of course the, people who can actually like get a doctor out there to look at, at someone, don't care. And they're like, well, we leave those people alone, kind of a deal. And that's what like, James Dean is like, oh, I wouldn't go in there. They're, full of disease and, and stuff like that. And then she's like, these are human beings. I got to go make sure they're okay. And, hey, doctor, after you, took a look at, people here, can you go check out this one little boy? And then seeing him, grow up, that little boy grow up to, go in the service, and then the sadness of when he dies and stuff. And the idea of, because I think, Carrie at one point was like, give him Angel, give him the ranch. You're like, you're looking to, have someone run the ranch, when you pass away. None of your kids want to, apparently. Speaking of that, I did want to add, I love Dennis Hopper in this because
Yeah,
Dennis Hopper really feels like me a lot.
yeah. Mhm.
Where I feel like, my parents conservative and I'm, not. And so it feels like, kind of like where I'm like more of like a sensitive kind of person,
Mhm.
I feel like I identified with that and like the kind of the fear of like wanting to express yourself in different ways than expected.
Yeah.
And just being super sensitive and wanting to express that. And I love that with Dennis Hopper in the movie. And it's just like
Yeah.
so interesting to see a young Dennis Hopper
I know
in this
that's the
role.
biggest thing. It's like baby Dennis Hopper. Yeah, but I love the parallels you can make, and I think
Yeah.
that's the thing about this movie is there's so many different characters, even though it is a contained story, that I feel like you can find yourself in every one of them. And I think there's even going to be people who see themselves as the James Dean in this, and I think there's a
Yeah.
sadness to that. But I really do think, this kind of covers every ounce of the American dream, every role to play in it. And I think that's why it is so universal and why it has held up. And I don't think that people talk about this enough now, this movie. I think it's kind of one of those movies that I hadn't really heard much about until we covered Place in the Sun and I looked into this one and Shane. And I'm excited to watch Shane because I'm excited to see
Same.
how this like trilogy ends because I believe that was nominated as well. But
Yeah. Well,
I'm just like, I wonder why this one hasn't been as praised. I really don't know because this is also James Dean's last role. Like you would think this would be a really well documented, and maybe it is, and I'm just like aloof to it. But I feel like this is never as talked about. Maybe it's because it doesn't win the Oscar. But I do love that we are kind of able to make this discovery because it is one of those movies that I think I haven't really said it, but I really love. I really think it's great.
yeah.
Do
Same.
I do I where do I put it with Place in the Sun? It's different because that's such a smaller story and scale. But I think it's a little bit more engaging consistently, whereas this one does take its time at times where I'm waiting sometimes for the time to go and then I when I reflect on it I realize how meaningful it was. But it's one of those movies you don't know you're in a great movie till you're out of it. Whereas the Place in the
Yeah.
Sun I was like consistently like edge of my seat, so it really is just a very interesting difference. But I do love how they are both very different as well. And that George Stevens has such versatility in telling these darker human stories. Yeah, I really like it. It's hard because you could go frame by frame dissecting it. We haven't really
Yeah.
talked much about Rock Hudson specifically, but I think he's also amazing. I think it's really great to see him because he's another name that you hear along like James Dean and these big like movie stars of the time. But until you actually watch his performance, you're like, wow, like he can actually act. He's not just a movie
Yeah.
star. And I think this honestly was the one that sold him on a lot of people to be like, oh wait, he is a really good actor. And I think he has some of the hardest stuff to do. I do want to really briefly talk about the James Dean stuff though at the end because it is kind of what we talked about earlier with the posthumous of it all. Like it is
Mhm.
kind of a little haunting that the last shot of his movie is him kind of just sitting in that big room alone, kind of just falling on his face. And I think that's just so eerie. But it is also kind of like a melancholic way of showing like that this man kind of was pushed past his limits and succumbed to the pressure, but also showing like this is the last great movie star of this era kind of taking his final bow as well. And I think there's just some kind of
Yeah.
eerie ghost shit with that just kind of like made me go, ooh, like kind of made me shiver a bit. But obviously he didn't take his life or do anything in that sense, but it was a very tragic sudden ending for him. But
Yeah.
it is kind of crazy to just kind of see like this film being about trying to let go of these conservative views of the past and move forward and having to literally quite literally do that with the star. Not necessarily that he's conservative, maybe he was, I don't know, but more so just kind of like learning how to say goodbye to this actor who was so treasured for such a short amount of time. And having that taken away from you. He had so much hope in this career. We had so much hope for James Dean. Now he's gone. It's kind of the same thing with his character. It's like we had so much hope for him, and now he's just too far gone in a
Yeah.
metaphorical sense. So I just think there's an eeriness to that, which is beautiful. It's poetic, but it is sad. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or any more
Um,
on James Dean or Rock Hudson.
just just a lot of conversation can be had, I'm sure, about James Dean and just like the eerie kind of uh eerie kind of like parallels, I guess. Sorry, but between real life and fiction and what he was doing as an actor versus real life and stuff like that, and just him dying so young and yet having some of the greatest like performances and
Mhm.
stuff like that. I do think it's really interesting, how the movie ends versus how James Dean tragically passed away. And then with Rock Hudson, just dude and that arc I just think is really, really incredible. And I love how the movie kind of takes its time to, show that change instead of, telling you the change or anything like that. And it's not even like that dramatic of a change. Like you still feel, I mean, at the very end, he says something about, he uses a racial slur against, one of the Mexican little boys. But when he uses the racial slur, it's kind of like a thing where that's kind of like what he grew up calling people. And yet, that he has a care for that little boy and, because it's his grandson, that little boy and his daughter-in-law, because he literally almost like puts his life on the line trying to, or his body on the line, trying to defend them and say, you don't like treat people like this. You don't treat like strangers that I don't know like this. And you don't treat damn sure I don't treat my family like this. I don't care what color they are. And stuff. So I love how they don't have him like a neat, clean, like, he still uses like, bad language for people, but that there's this growing deep care and his growth is just not over even at the end.
Yeah.
And I love how in that scene that we talked about, one of the great scenes of the fight in the diner of that this is not a fight where he wins standing heroically above the guy.
He loses essentially.
He loses. He's bloody on the ground. The guy throws a "we refuse service to you" kind of a deal. And he wins. And it's like, even though the progressive side and the change lost that day, this is still, someone fighting for that change to happen. And I love how, it's like kind of like a message for today is like people who mean you wrong may still win, but that doesn't mean that you give up the fight and just let them win. You keep being a presence of force against them, and you keep, trying to make sure that change comes into effect and stuff like that, because otherwise, no change will happen. So it's a great movie.
It's one of those things also, I like what you said, where he's not done growing, because none of us are. Like, we're not done growing till the day we die, and I think that's important to know. Like, we're getting older, we're growing, we're learning so much more every single day of our lives. And I love that he loses, but he also wins in the sense that, like, Elizabeth Taylor's like, I finally see you. Like, you are finally like who I always wanted you to be. And I think that's important too, because like, we haven't really talked about her because she's such a just kind of stagnant character, but I think you need her to be kind of the stagnant character in this, where she kind of has to be this constant for him to grow around. And I think it's cool that she's the one who's kind of like sturdy and because like the idealistic like family value of the time is that, the man is the grounded one. He's the one the breadwinner, the one who mans the fort, who holds his ground, and his lady is his side piece or whatever, which is such a terrible, gross conservative view. But to have her be the one who's kind of just the more stoic, more like grounded, more like put together, she has her shit together, and he's the one who has to kind of like, these kind of insecure men around her are the ones who have to kind of like get their shit together, is really nice. And it does create a nice beat to their romance as well, because I was worried this was going to be a love triangle the whole time too, but it's not. Like, there's a little bit of flirtation early on with James Dean, but it is really kind of tangentially happening. Like, there's not a lot of James Dean love story directly to Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, he's more to their daughter. So I do like that, it's not just a love triangle or anything. It becomes more than just these romances and relationships, because this could have just been that. And that's kind of what Gone with the Wind is. Whereas this one, it actually feels like it's about something more than just the relationships, but the relationship is kind of what anchors it and what brings us back and what gives him a drive to want to be better, because his wife wants him to be better. And I really love that about it.
Yeah. I think it just like plays into like the character development of James Dean and his jealousy and what drives him to want to be something more and stuff, and how that's not always great. So Great movie. We keep talking about it forever.
Yeah, Giant. I'm sure we'll bring it up at the end of the show for many reasons as well. But Giant, nominated for 10, only wins 1, which is crazy. It only wins Best Director. It's a power of the dog, quite literally. It only wins Director for George Stevens. It gets nominated though for Picture, for Actor for James Dean, Actor for Rock Hudson, the double actor nominee. We very rarely see that. Supporting Actress for Mercedes McCambridge for her half hour of time. Adapted Screenplay, Musical Score, Dramatic or Comedy, Art Direction, Costume Design, Color, and Film Editing. James Dean wanted to be the king of oil, just like Daniel Day-Lewis, but could not. But you know who is the king? Who had a really good year in another breakout year? Him and Anthony Perkins. This was a very big breakout year for Yul Brynner. But let's talk about Yul Brynner in the titular King and I.
Yeah, James Dean was trying to drink that dude's milkshake. You know what I'm talking about? The King and I, directed by Walter Lang, written by Ernest Lehman. Cinematography by Leon Shamroy. Music by Richard Rogers. Starring Deborah Kerr, Yul Brynner, Rita Moreno, Terry Saunders, Martin Benson, Rex Thompson, Patrick Adiarte, Alan Mowbray, Jeffrey Toone, and Carlos Rivas. Synopsis. A progressive school teacher pushes back against traditional norms and befriends the King of Siam when she is hired to teach the king's children. Based on the 1944 novel Anna and the King of Siam by Margaret Landon and the 1951 musical The King and I by Richard Rogers and Oscar Hammerstein II.
Yes. So I don't know if we've ever covered Rogers and Hammerstein musical here. I don't know. I don't recall. Obviously a big part of my childhood. I grew up with all these musicals: Carousel, Oklahoma. Obviously this, The King and I, South Pacific, Cinderella. This one is probably the one of those 5 musicals. They have so many more as well, but of all their big musicals, this is the one I've never really loved. But I was like, you know what? I've never seen the movie, so like, let me check out the movie and see if it's maybe better than the stage musical. Usually it's never that case, but I'm very interested to hear what you have to say, because I know you've never seen this, never heard of it, or never heard it. But I don't want to necessarily cloud my opinion too much by my comparison to the stage musical or anything. But I'll start you off first, Chad. What do you think of The King and I?
Well, first, I believe Siam is nowadays Thailand.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting. Like, you know, my sister went to Thailand and stuff like that at one point. So very, very cool to see a little bit of part of that
and
side of the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, like gorgeous. Yeah. And this film definitely emphasizes that. Everything's so regal, so gorgeous, so rich, so just chef's kiss.
Yeah. You know, famously in the Discord that, you know, we frequent, I was basically saying, I didn't know The King and I was a musical. I don't know. I knew, like, I'd heard of The King and I knew that they made like an animated version of it, which is apparently very bad.
Yeah, it's
but I just didn't remember that it was a King and I a musical necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, pleasantly surprised. You know, I did like the musical sequences in it. You know, I do understand where you're coming from. Seeing that you probably don't really like this one. I'm kind of like,
I was trying not to allude to it, but yeah, I think you kind of read into what I was.
Yeah, I'm kind of
going to go into it, but yeah, you're right.
Kind of like half and half on it a little bit, where I like the idea of the school teacher coming in and challenge. It's kind of like, you know, Giant, where it's like the progressive voice coming in and, you know, challenging and stuff like that, and saying, you know, maybe don't do things the way you're doing it necessarily. This is a place where the king has like so many wives, doesn't really care about any of them. I'm not going to say he doesn't care about his children, because I'm sure he does. But he's got so many, he can't really give a lot of them like individual attention. Of course, there is one that is like slated to be like the next king. And so, you know, to see her go in and try to teach these kids, and apparently they don't know like a lot about the world. They don't really know what snow is. And, you know, to try to teach them like basic education about the world, but also teach them, you know, ideas of maybe slavery is wrong, stuff like that, where the kids are like, huh, but what if it's like,
Yeah.
what if you say they don't want you to own them, but what if we really want to? And stuff like that. I'm like, gee, whoa. Kind of a deal. It's like the basic ideas of like human freedom and autonomy, taught to these kids. And I just think that's, kind of a really interesting, thing to do. And I like kind of how it ends on like more of a progressive note where, the king's dying, which is, tragic because, they do build that friendship and stuff. And, I like some of the stuff that happens with that and their conversations that they have. But, the king is not like a good guy. Like he's, terrorizing the people, he's taking claim over all these wives, and then when one of them finds love and actually wants to be with this one person, he basically has the guy killed, and stuff, and then he's dying, and then she's like, she's mad about that for a second, and then he's dying, and then she kind of like holds his hand and like kind of reconvenes with them and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, he just had that guy killed and like ruined these people's lives.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but then going into the idea of the young son who is like, my father's dying, I'm going to become the next king, being like, okay, I'm going to say that you no longer have to bow to me, but you still have to respect me, just not bow to me. And, I see that as kind of like a small change, but then my ultimate change is like, maybe no longer have a king.
Yeah, right.
People, maybe have democracy or something where people can choose what happens and their leaders and stuff like that. So, of course, that's going to take a lot of change in doing. I don't know what Thailand's doing right now, actually, if they still have I don't know if they have a king still.
So, no, I think part of it probably had to do with the name change. Like once it was not Siam anymore. I don't know though. I actually don't know any history, so I should not be able to say.
I think it goes a good ways, but doesn't go far enough to actually have like a really good like progressive voice and change and stuff. And I think it's more focused on like the relationship between the school teacher and the king rather than, it's called The King and I, rather than the change and stuff. So yeah, I think it goes halfway there, but it doesn't go fully there.
Yeah.
And making like the king a character you actually want to root for. I don't even know if that's possible unless he makes a full change and doesn't kill that guy.
Yeah, it's like Beauty and the Beast in a way where like I get the idea is like you're trying to take this beauty, change the beast, make him have a heart again.
Yeah.
It's a story we've seen so many times.
Good parallel,
but I do agree. It's like harder. It makes it harder and harder as the film goes on when he does kind of revert. But again, he does change. Like it is a more likable guy than he was in the beginning, at least in personality, because he's supposed to be very annoying early on. Like annoying is the best word for it because he is, and I think Yul Brynner actually plays it really well. The thing is, like I said, like this is just my least favorite of the musicals, so I was excited to see the film version because I hoped it would bring something more to it, and I think what it did bring to it was a sense of majesty and scale and visual splendor, which I really liked. But yeah, something about the musical just like has never hit for me. And I think it's one of those things where I just don't love the source material, kind of for the reasons you were saying. It doesn't go far enough. It obviously has a progressive message. Just the whole point of it is to be progressive, to like change this guy's very conservative ways. But at the same time, I think the hardest thing is that you are setting it in a world where you have characters that are from a different country and could also be portrayed in a way that kind of comes across racist at times because you're trying to tell that culture that what they're doing is wrong and try to fix their culture. But then does that become a little bit white appropriation-y where you're trying to like make like get the white person to come save all the people of color and make them better people? That's kind of the point where I'm kind of like, oh, but it is like what he's doing is bad. So it's like, yeah, the king is bad, but it's also it becomes a little bit white savory in that way. And that's not even the biggest problem I have. It's more so just that like I just find it kind of boring. I just don't love the music. And I think that's kind of where, like, in a musical, why are all these songs just people standing around? Like, I want dancing. I want some sort of why are they singing in this moment as opposed to just speaking? Like when she's like, I whistle a happy tune. Okay, but like, why are you singing right now? Getting to know you, getting to know all about you. Why do you have to sing that right now? And I think that's the difference between this and like a great musical is like great musicals, the music comes out of some emotional height. And I've never felt like this movie has, or the musical. So this is a criticism of both, but I never really felt like the songs came out of a place where the characters need to sing their feelings. Like I look at Carousel, which is one of the most
Mm.
beautiful musicals of all time, also by Rodgers and Hammerstein, and just like all the musical moments come out of such passion in that musical. And it doesn't even need to be like overwhelming passion. It can be a positive, fun passion, like America and West Side Story. Like I want to live in America, but I'm also going to sass this guy. I'm also going to make a statement. Or Maria, the most beautiful sound I ever heard. I need to sing about it. Joanna and Sweeney Todd, same thing. Here,
Mhm.
it's like, getting to know you, getting to know you. I'm like, but like, why are we singing? Like, and I get it, it's a musical, but it's also like there needs to be some motivation behind the music, and I feel like they needed to do something other than just sitting and singing. Otherwise, just watch the musical. And I think that's the thing is like, I didn't really think that it translated to film in terms of the
Mm.
musical structure in a very different way than you could just watch it on stage. It honestly felt like we were watching just a stage production because a lot of the cinematography is very wide angle, showing off obviously these beautiful sets, but wanting to get this full picture of these sets, the king in this big space, all the kids. But it's like you have the film medium, like do something different with it.
Mm.
Maybe make the musical numbers a little livelier. So I think really just as a musical, I just don't really like it. But then you have to account for, this is a Russian guy playing an Asian guy, or, this is this white woman coming trying to fix this culture of these Asian people. Like it is one of those things where it's just of its time, and I never really think there is a fix to this unless you completely change it. Because the problem is if you don't make it Siamese, if you make it some just random king that she has to, if you make it like ambiguous, then you're also erasing the culture of the Siamese people, because you're now saying that okay, we're just going to avoid talking about race altogether and just make it a generic king. But the problem is, no, now you're kind of erasing culture. But at the same time, if you have this culture, then it's also trying to like talk down to this culture. I don't know. It's very tough. It is really one of these weird kind of balancing acts that I've just never felt this musical has been able to work around necessarily. I still enjoy certain moments. Like some of the songs are cute, but I'm just like, I don't know. It just never hit for me. And there's so many great musicals that I didn't love, but I've come around on even more, like Oliver, Music Man. There are these musicals that I'm like liking even more and more with age that I didn't love as a kid. This is one I didn't love as a kid, and I still don't love now. And this is my first time seeing the movie of it, so maybe when I rewatch the stage version, I'll appreciate it a bit more. Um, Also, I just hate that the fact that the lead woman who sings so much is not singing. Like Deborah Carr is not actually singing; it's a voiceover. So that's another element where I'm like, like come on, cast someone who could sing. But I just it's
Annoying.
very hard. It's very hard because I want to really like this. This is the musical. I want to champion the musical,
Yeah.
especially Rodgers and Hammerstein. I love Rodgers and Hammerstein. I've worked on so many of their musicals, but it's just like this one just I don't know, just doesn't do it for me. And I wish it could, because I think it's beautiful. It's gorgeous to
Yeah.
look at. Like it wins the right awards. I mean, it wins music, sound, art direction, and costumes. I'm like, okay, great. And then Yul Brynner. But I want to talk about Yul Brynner, though. I mean, Chad, you can respond to what I said, obviously, but I want to also pick your brain and see what you think of Yul Brynner, because I think it's a great performance. But is it a great performance if it's also kind of inauthentic in a way? Like, is it offensive? Is it not? Is it the times? Is it a tasteful portrayal? Because he played this role on Broadway and he was a big star, so they brought him to the movie, and then he became a movie star. But like this was his breakout role.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of like, this comes up so often where it's like, especially like around this time where you have a lot of like white people playing these roles, that, even when we get to Ten Commandments, where it's like, Moses was Egyptian and you have like this like super conservative, like white, American,
Charlton Heston.
guy.
There's no whiter name than Charlton Heston. Like
Right. And then Yul Brynner in that too, not just playing a person of Asian descent here, but also a person of African descent, and an Egyptian. I don't know. It's weird because with Yul Brynner, and I don't know how I feel about like my own but opinion on this, but it just feels kind of like Yul Brynner feels a little bit kind of like racially ambiguous. Like I didn't even know he was Russian until you said something.
Right.
And when you
That is a
did,
good
I was
point.
like, oh, so because I feel like he can pass for an African person or a person of Asian descent.
Yeah.
I feel like, in the moment, it might not be as like, well, this is clearly like a white person doing like brown face
Right.
or whatever. But does that make it right? It kind of a deal. It was almost kind of like, when you get into the game of, wait, what about Ben Kingsley playing Mahatma Gandhi? He's
Yeah.
English, but it's like, oh, but he's part Indian, so it
Right.
actually it's fair. But
Yeah.
then it's like, well, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
This is a clearly white guy. But this guy, he kind of looks, ambiguous in kind of a way, so he can
Yeah.
pass for something, and it gets into a very weird, uncomfortable place of race and how someone like skin tone and all this stuff and whatnot. So it is kind of just like a but you're 100% correct. That is definitely inauthentic because he's not an Asian person,
Yeah.
and he's not an Egyptian person either. So
Yeah. But
you know,
authenticity aside, did you like his performance or did you
I
find it a
think
little too schmacky?
I think aside, I like it because
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what he was going for.
Mhm.
Of kind of like the exaggerated king, like I'm the king, kind of a deal and stuff,
Mhm.
and I
Like
kind of
almost
like
putting up
that.
for an insecurity, like almost a mask in a way. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did pick up on that as well. But I find that it had some good depth, but then I also liked his kind of portrayal as the the king that's like I don't know, it's hard to explain, but a really good like um uh opposite of Deborah Kerr in the movie
Mhm.
and stuff, and just I mean, it's kind of like he talked kind of like how his son talked in the movie, whereas like I'm the king and I don't understand this, and stuff, and I just like that kind of performance. I don't know, I just think it's kind of silly, but I think that's kind of, I mean, until someone's being killed and stuff like that, it's kind of like the tone of the movie, where
Yeah.
it's like I'm, people say I'm barbaric, but I'm not barbaric,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And I don't know, I kind of like that tone.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's the thing. That's why I asked you, because I agree it's not probably the best ideal casting choice, but
Yeah,
there's something about his performance that's magnetic, and there's a reason he
yeah.
wins. I mean, he wins the Tony for it. This was his big breakout role on Broadway, and
Oh,
actually, he wasn't bald, shaved his head for the role, and then because
ooh.
everyone kind of made it, it's kind of crazy to say, but he kind of became a sex symbol because of it, because he was the first like movie star who was bald, and then he wins the Oscar for it. He's this big, high profile bald movie star, so he's like, I'm just gonna make this my identity, and he like just started shaving his head, and I think that's just really cool. Like he kind of just like let this role kind of make a career for him, and he kind of like paid homage to that throughout his career by like being this bald actor. Because I think he's also bald in Ten Commandments, I believe. He might have a wig on or something, or a hat or head covering, but it is really cool just to see like this guy gets this big break on Broadway, gets picked to do the movie, wins the Oscar, and then becomes one of the biggest movie stars of the time, and has like this iconic look about him too, where like he kind of
Yeah,
invented the baldness is sexy trend. So like,
do that.
hey, it worked for a lot of other people too. Patrick Stewart is another example. Dan Merle, like a lot of bald kings. So, yeah, really, really great for Yul Brynner to have this moment, even though it is maybe nowadays probably better for someone like Ken Watanabe to play, who played it on Broadway in
Yeah.
the revival, which is cool.
Okay.
If you get a chance to see that one or listen to that soundtrack, Ken Watanabe was very good.
Mm,
And that's the thing, like if they're good performers performing it, like it can still be engaging and entertaining. Like
yeah.
I'd probably still watch this again opposed to some of the others in this slate, but I'm just like, I don't know. I think it's just so flawed that it's hard, and it's a musical lover in me that it really wants to champion it, but it's also like it just has so many issues that I feel like other Rodgers and Hammerstein's musicals are able to avoid. I mean, Cinderella, Cinderella. South Pacific has some little things here and there with Pacific Islanders, but even then, it's still done, I think, pretty tastefully. Whereas this is the one I think is aged the poorest. But that's why we have the show, to kind of talk about the good and the bad.
I just love when we get to musicals because it's one of those things where I never know if you're gonna be, because you're such a musical guy, like you're in musicals and they're such a big part of your life, and you just know so much about them that it's just, you never know kind of like what side you're going to fall on, because, I feel like you're more critical about them because you know all the ins and outs, and
True.
how to critique, like, dancing better and singing, and
Yeah.
like when someone's lip syncing and when they're not, and all this stuff. And me, who's more of a, like, I love musicals as well, but I'm nowhere near on the same level of like knowledge and about any of them. Obviously, I didn't know King and I was a musical necessarily. Like, I think I did know, but I also was like, oh wait, oh, they're singing now, cool, kind of a deal. But yeah, I love always kind of seeing where you're gonna fall on one, and you're a lot of them you don't really like that we've seen, but then when you love a musical,
Right.
oh my god, it's like your favorite thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, I want to go through like the musicals and find the track record, because like Gigi, Fanny, those are iconic busts. King and I wouldn't say is as low as those, but then you have some, like I remember, we did West Side Story, we did both West Side Stories. I mean, I feel like the more modern musicals, but then you have Amelia Perez, which I also didn't like. So yeah, it's very interesting. Like I feel like it's very hit or miss. I want to go through and see exactly what the ratio is for musicals I liked versus not liked, that were at least Best Picture nominated.
I mean, you're also, I feel like, a little bit more middle on the road on Oliver.
Oh no, I would say I'm positive on Oliver. I
positive, but like not as positive as like I was, which I was surprised.
Well, you and Kelsey had it your number one, but yeah, that was one where I love Romeo and Juliet and Rachel Moore, but that was a good slate. But also, like, we are going to be talking about another musical in a few months that is also Rodgers and Hammerstein that also won Best Picture. So we will. The hills are alive.
Oh, right.
Sound of music. So we'll get there in 1966. We are going to be doing that by the end of the year, which is going to be fun. I believe that's November.
Is it a Christmas movie?
Yeah, it kind of fits that perfect like Thanksgiving slot, But it is really interesting because we don't usually foretell slates ahead of time, but we will be just doing Sound of Music this year because it wasn't upset. So I'm very excited to talk about it because that is the one that I think everyone kind of universally agrees is probably their best. But we will have to see if we agree because you have not seen it, correct?
I've seen it.
Okay, I have too. All right, so we both like it. Okay, fine. But we'll reassess it and see if we like it more or less. Maybe Chad doesn't like it. Maybe I just assume that. I don't know. We'll find out. But The King and I, the Academy really liked it. It gave it 5 wins out of 9 nominations. It got the win for actor for Yul Brynner, of course. Music scoring of a musical, that was a separate category than just dramatic scoring. Sound recording, art direction, and then costume design, color. It was also nominated for picture, director for Walter Lang, actress for Deborah Carr, and then cinematography, color. But speaking of cinematography and color, I mean, there's no bigger epic this year than the epic to end all epics. Probably the biggest, longest nominee we'll ever get. Was Lawrence of Arabia longer? We'll have to check. But I will check while you're explaining the background on the 10. Sorry, Cecil B. DeMille's The 10 Commandments. Yeah, he wrote it.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. It's from the Bible.
The 10 Commandments, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, written by Aeneas McKenzie, Jesse L. Lasky Jr., Jack Garris, and Frederick M. Frank. Cinematography by Loyal Griggs. Music by Elmer Bernstein. Starring Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, Ann Baxter, Edward G. Robinson, Yvonne DiCarlo, Deborah Paget, John Derrick, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Nina Foch, Martha Scott, Judith Anderson, Vincent Price, John Carradine, Olive Deering, Douglas Dumbrill, and Frank DeCova. Synopsis. When a young male baby is saved from death, the grown-up man named Moses chooses a life of servitude before speaking to God and freeing the slaves. Based on the Holy Scriptures by my man, the Lord God up in heaven, the 1949, I guess that's arguable, the 1949 novel Prince of Egypt by Dorothy Clark Wilson, the novel Pillar of Fire by J.H. Ingram, and the novel On Eagle's Wings by A.E. Southen.
There you go. I just wanted to do a little fact check just to get our facts straight. The longest, Lawrence of Arabia is 7 minutes longer than this, and Gone with the Wind is, I believe, 11 minutes longer than this. So we have had 2 movies that are slightly longer than this
What
that we've
about
covered.
Killers of the Flower Moon? Is that up there?
Killers of the Flower Moon is 206 minutes. This is 220. So it's a little shorter.
Mm.
And then The Brutalist actually is 5 minutes shorter than this. So The
Oh
Brutalist
wow.
came close. So we've covered some big long nominees, but this is definitely one of the biggest, one of the longest. No, that's what she said is intended. But Chad, what are your thoughts on the 10 Commandments, whether it be the commandments, the Bible, or the movie, whatever thoughts you want to give? Because this is one I had not seen. I don't know if you've seen this one because I know this is one that people watch like every Easter. I was never one of those people. Also, because it's interesting, isn't Jesus the Easter story? Anyway, but
Yeah.
people watch this. It airs on TV every Easter. I just never watched it until now. So I'm interested. What do you have to say? I don't know if you've watched this yet. Have you seen this before?
No, this was my first time seeing this. I knew like a little bit of the story, I mean, like, Bible class and all that,
Yeah.
I would say, the Last Supper and, the Last Temptation of Christ and all those, kind of things is like, more of the Easter, like Christian story. And this is more of the story of the Jewish people and, how that goes about. And you have like stuff like Passover in this and whatnot. And I found it really interesting because I don't know if I had ever really seen like a full picture of what was going on around this time, and definitely not as an adult. As a kid, you kind of just like shrug off, like, I think story stuff, you don't really understand like the full scope of, what was going on and like, slavery and, oppression and all this stuff. And watching it as an adult, I enjoyed this one. I for the most part, I'll say, it is quite long. So a lot of, stuff happens. And I'll say I really liked about half of it. And then I think like the second half is a little bit more challenging, especially with the satisfying like narrative of it, where I was almost like, this could have been a better movie if God wasn't in it. And I know people might click off for me saying that, but I'm just sitting there like thinking about like the whole story of it, like as a story. I'm like, forget like, your parallels of, this stuff actually happening, any of the stuff actually happening, whether it did or not. I mean, there was slavery in Egypt, I imagine, so there are things that were like real life, but there is a story here that may or may not have happened, the way that it's sold. But I'm sitting here thinking like, this is a great story of a kid that was saved. Like, I mean, tragic where they were killing kids to, I don't know what, I forget what the mandate was. They were killing young boys. But they were killing kids, and then, they saved this one, and that one is the one that like kind of has like a prophecy around him, and he's going to be like this great leader. But then, when he finds out this terrible, I guess not terrible secret, but like the secret of, that he was saved from certain death or life of servitude to go on to great things and be this great leader. And then you have kind of like the, Amadeus kind of, parallel, we'll get to Amadeus at some point. That parallel of, the, Moses and, oh God, what is his name? Yul Brynner's character, Ramses, going against each other, kind of a deal. And Moses being like the true kind of like king or, heir or whatever. And then when he finds this out, about his birthright of actually being born into slavery, you would think that he would go like, no, shut that up. Okay, I'm king. All right. He doesn't do that. Instead, he's like, no, I need to go be with my people, and I need to see, him living amongst the people, and then being like this force of, it's almost like a when we watched Gandhi, of that, person who's like this, noble person, and then like, decides to rough it and, experience hardship and pain to show that like, this is wrong what people are going through. And, I love how he does that. And then he uses that as a bargaining tool, because he goes in and he's like, I was once a very important person, so they have to listen to me when I come in and I say, oh, this is wrong. And then he goes to like free all the slaves and do the stuff, which is great, only to, see God become a Super Saiyan and like change his form and stuff and just be like, I've seen God. And they're like, you look different, kind of a deal. And then only to free all the people. And then they get to this promised land, the new Israel. To see like the birth of that was kind of cool. Only to have God then be like, all right, now y'all are free, but you're getting a little rowdy for my taste. I don't like this. You guys are being nuts. You need to step in line. Here's these commandments you have to follow. And then, oh, you're not following them. Okay. Moses throws the tablets. Explodes. I don't know what that was going to happen. I was like, holy shit. I thought he just read the commandments and then people went, okay, we'll follow that. No, that's not what happens. He throws it at that statue. It explodes. And then God's like, all right, y'all are going to have a timeout. I'm going to punish you for like 40 years. And you're going to walk for 40 years. And I'm like, gee, I guess I can't say Jesus Christ because he's not there yet. But Jesus, man. Like, you're going to make these people, you're going to punish your chosen people the way, like, almost the way that they were punished before as, like, in servitude and slavery, almost to where they're like, someone falls under the machine that's going or whatever. Who cares? We'll get another person to do that job or whatever. And I'm just like, why is God like the same as the oppressors over there? Like, it's Old Testament God for you.
You're coming with so many good one-liners. I mean, like, yeah, wow. No, just the fact that you open this with the 10 Commandments would be better without God in it. But like, I get your point. Like, it's a very interesting viewpoint. Like, I didn't grow up. I mean, I grew up like doing Bible classes and like reading the Bible and stuff, but I've never like sat down and read this story out, and I've never really seen it visualized. So it was very interesting, but it did feel very much like this is the story and this is how we're presenting it. Like, this is what's in the Bible. It didn't feel like there was a lot of like change to it, which like you don't have to change a story, but it's very interesting because like I feel like if you were to make this movie, you would have taken some liberties with the story, historical accuracy and whatnot. Whereas I feel like Cecil B. DeMille just wanted to kind of present the most authentic, thorough, grand version of the story he could, and kind of just visualize what he was reading. And I think there's a good function for that, but I'm just more interested when someone takes material and then tries to make it their own and kind of craft it in a more interesting way, whereas this feels very much like cut and dry, cut and paste. And I do even like...
I just want to throw out, like Scorsese did with The Last Temptation of Christ.
Right. I think that's always more interesting, especially when it comes to biblical epics, because yes, everyone has different religions, so there's just different perceptions of these same stories, which is why it's so fascinating when people do take it on. Like even stage musicals, like seeing like Children of Eden, this kind of Stephen Schwartz, who did Wicked, like his version of what that start of the Bible was, and then also seeing like Jesus Christ Superstar, seeing a more like rock and roll type telling of Jesus's story. Like I love when people make interpretations, whereas this one's just so clear cut that honestly I was kind of like, I'd rather just read the Bible then, like, and kind of fill it in for myself. But it is an impressive production. Like, it is one of those things I don't want to take away from how glorious. I mean, that parting of the Red Sea, as bad as it may look now, looked really, really good at the time. And that's the thing. Learning about how they did it with those like big water tanks, and then they were able to reverse the shot and then overlay it. Like, there's a really cool production that went into that, and I think that's the thing. There's so many extras. There's so many lived-in locations. That's what I appreciate about every single one of these films, is that they really utilize the space and the production design and the color so well. Maybe not Friendly Persuasion because it just kind of takes place on a farm or whatever, but I do think everything is just very glorious to look at. But it's also one of those things where it just feels like Cecil B. DeMille is like, I want to go out with a bang, because he passed away or retired a few years after this. This was like his last great big movie. because he was admittedly pretty old. I mean, he's in this movie. He kind of narrates it, and I think that's also so interesting that he's kind of the one who's like telling the story alongside it. It really feels like he has his stamp on the material. Like this is his movie. This is what he wanted to do, which is what I was saying earlier. It's funny that he's the only one who doesn't get nominated for Best Director for his movie because he's the one who feels like he directed more than anyone else in terms of like, this is my vision of the Ten Commandments. This is what I read on the page, what I'm bringing to life. It reminds me of when Denis Villeneuve and Hans Zimmer talk about Dune. It's like, this is the book I read as a kid. This is how I envisioned it on the screen. And Cecil B. DeMille is the only one of the 5 who doesn't get nominated. I'm like, wow, like all that work and you're the one who doesn't get it. Opposed to like Around the World in 80 Days, where that director was just hired to make the producer's vision. But alas, I do like though when a director does have a stamp on something, even if it is so, just fact for fact, cut and paste of what the book is. It is really cool to see like what his interpretation visually was. And I do think he creates some really good images. Like there's some images that I will definitely remember in my head, even the 10 Commandments stuff at the end with the Super Saiyan and all that. Like, but that is a memorable image. But that's the thing is like, these are merely memorable images. And I feel like the story itself is just kind of what you'd expect if you read it. I don't think it offers a lot of surprise is probably the point I'm trying to make, even though there are moments that are surprising just because I don't know the story as well. But it is kind of one of those things where I feel like it offers the least to kind of just like interpret, if that makes sense. Like it is very cut and dry. But sometimes movies, that's why they show it every Easter, because it is just kind of one of those comfortable traditional things. Maybe if I watched it every Easter, I'd have a bigger fondness for it or anything like that. But good performances too. I mean, Nefertiti, I love Anne Baxter's role. I think Charlton Heston's great. Yul Brynner's great in here. So it has all the elements of a great movie. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea, but it's an impressive production. Like it's glorious. It is fantastically made. So it's a hit or miss for me.
I do want to say, even though it's like really long, I do like the pacing of it. Like I was actually really enjoying watching, especially that first half. And I love when you have like an intermission in movies and like they choose like the perfect ending. It's kind of like in 2001: A Space Odyssey when it shows the Howl looking at them talking. My God. Amazing. And it's like such a great halfway.
Like The Brutalist, where it's like I'm finally coming home to you type deal. Yeah.
And here it's him talking to the burning bush, which which reminds me of I don't want to attribute to the wrong person, but I think it might be Doug Benson who was like, Moses, I think you've been burning some bush. If you think you were talking to God. But yeah, I think, this is epic in so many ways. I think the pacing is really good. I really enjoyed watching a lot of this movie, which is a testament to which is a testament to the direction and how even though it is sort of like a cut and paste of the story, I feel like it's not all the time always bad, because it's like if it's a good story, don't really have to change it to it. And I think this is mostly a good story because I really love what it has to say about like humanity and slavery and stuff like that. And I hope I didn't offend too many people talking about God and stuff like that. But
listen, I'm usually the one who's making funny jokes that are sometimes borderline offensive. So I'm like that. You've kind of taken the reign this episode.
Well, I did want to say, because I am borderline religious myself. I think I'm more of like an agnostic at this point, but I just do think it's really nuts to like compare like Old Testament God to like New Testament like Jesus and the Holy Trinity and all that stuff, and it's more of like God's healing people and stuff like that. And here it's like, y'all going too crazy and I don't like it. Here's the commandments and stuff like that. And I just thought it was like a really interesting way to end it, and I just found it a little unsatisfying where I was like, the people are free, let them be free.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree, and you know what? I agree with your fact of the runtime not feeling long. I mean, it feels long, but it doesn't feel like we're wasting a lot of time because there's just so much story to tell. It feels like it actually is. Again, like he adapted the portion of the Bible that he needed to in whatever time he needed to do it. Like he didn't feel like he needed to stretch it out to fill time. It was more so just like this is how much time I need to tell the story. Which is better than the other way around, where it's like you want to make something big and epic, but really you're putting so much filler in. And I really don't think any of these movies really feel like there's, except for maybe one, there's too much like filler. It feels like everything is intentional. there's a point in these movies being as long as they are, like Giant, especially this one, Friendly Persuasion, The King and I. Like, it does make sense why these movies are as long as they are. So yeah,
Yeah.
10 Commandments, 7 nominees, only wins 1 special effects. I mean, for a movie that was such a big hit, it is really shocking how poorly it performed at the Oscars, because it didn't even get nominated for directing or acting either. It was nominated, though, for picture, sound recording, art direction, cinematography, color, costume design, color, and film editing. There's just so many epics, and when all the epics are glorious, colorful masterpieces, it's hard to, or at least technical masterpieces, it's hard to get the win. Only one film can win them all, and it looks like The King and I and Around the World in 80 Days took all the techs. Giant took director, and then acting went to some other movies that weren't even nominated. But all right, Chad, we got to do it. We got to rank these now. This is the hardest one for me, just because I know my number 1 and the other 4 are all kind of just like in the same area for me. Like I don't really have a very clear cut 2 through 5. I kind of know what my bottom is, but Chad, why don't we start with you? What is going to be your number 5?
Well, I was just going to say I was a little bit mixed on what my number 2 and what my number 3 were, but the conversation helped me solidify them
Okay.
pretty well. And I was right when my initial ranking. I was like, maybe 2 and 3 are going to swap, and they didn't. This is how I had it before we started recording. So my number 5 is Around the World in 80 Days.
That is my number 5 as well. So what is your number 4?
The King and I.
That is my number 4 as well. I wonder if we're going to have the same ranking this time. What is your number 3?
The 10 Commandments.
That is my number 3.
It's going to be the same.
What is your number 2?
Friendly Persuasion.
That is my number 2. And your number 1 is?
Giant.
And that is in my number 1 as well. There we go.
Yeah.
Same ranking. Let's go. That doesn't ever happen. That rarely happens. But yay.
Happened before, but yeah, this is.
And I will tell you.
Love this.
You want to know something crazy? This morning when I woke up, I put 10 Commandments at 2 and Friendly Persuasion at 3. And then right before we started filming, I switched them.
Crap. Yeah, it's one of those things where I was like, I like both of those movies. They're not as good as Giant, but I like them. And then the 10 Commandments, I was like, as epic as that movie is, like that ending is just so nuts. But Friendly Persuasion, I think, has a much better ending. So
for me, it was 10 Commandments. It is a better movie for me, like just in terms of its construction, just like it's a better movie, I think. But looking at this slate, when I'm ranking them, Friendly Persuasion is one I'd want to watch more, and one that I think in the midst of it all kind of was more refreshing because it wasn't as like grand and epic and grandiose. So I think, ultimately I ranked it by how much I like the movies, not how well I thought they were, if that makes sense. But 2 and 3, it's kind of a tie. But we'll get into our acting prizes because we might shed some love to some other films. But Chad, I believe you are first for actor this month. So who is going to be your best actor?
Okay, this is actually really tough because I love both of my actors and they're from the same movie. But I
might just take the other one, so
we'll see. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm gonna go with James Dean from Giant.
Okay, good, because the other one is who I wanted. So
maybe I don't know. I don't know if you have the other actor that I was gonna pick. If you had picked James Dean, I didn't know who was going first for what. But yeah, James Dean, incredible. Like I said, it's kind of like a Orson Welles like Citizen Kane kind of performance, where you show that evolution of him, growing into this, big tycoon and stuff. But I love like his kind of like just change, evolution from. I mean, I don't love because it's tragic, but I love how much of a range it is, where he goes from this character that's this little small ranch hand to this big, personality. He sort of stays the same the whole time, but like also changes. It's hard to explain. I love like his, mannerisms, just the way he does it. It's hard to tell. It's almost like James Dean feels, because he died so young, it feels in his performances sometimes, or this performance specifically, that he's ageless, because in the beginning he feels like in his 20s, but then when time passes, it really doesn't feel like he's a 20-year-old. And I think that performance, just he's able to kind of capture all that whole range of like life in between. And such a tragic ending. He plays it so well. and he plays that kind of, kind of piece of shit, like kind of, racist too kind of thing, but like not like overt, but also not overt about it too. I don't know. It's just a really, really great performance that, it kind of, what it kind of gave me vibes of,
Mhm.
Marlon Brando.
Yes, he's a very Brando-esque
Yeah,
actor for
and
sure.
kind of mumbling a lot and stuff like that
Mhm.
when he's performing and whatnot. But yeah, I loved it. I've loved some Brando performances, but not all of them. But like this one, this James Dean Brando performance, I really loved. I was
Yeah.
glued to the screen like the whole time he was on screen. So
Yeah. No, it's a great pick. I think it's also fitting because this is his last role, but also the only one we'll be able to award because it's 3 films. The first 2
that
weren't
factored into
nominated.
it. Yeah,
So Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden. So if we want him on the picture of this, not Hall of Fame because he has to win 2, but if you want him in the picture of this records, then you got him. This is
yeah,
the only time to do it. I'm picking the other actor from it. I think I know what you're going for because you kind of hinted at it. I think you were going to go Dennis Hopper,
yeah.
but I am going to go Rock Hudson
Mhm.
because I feel like Rock Hudson for me, it was actually kind of you took the words out of my mouth. The way he's able to show his age throughout and like show just kind of disgruntled, kind of hot-headed, not hot-headed, but like definitely not the nicest, kindest, warmest guy. But then by the end, he, kind of gets a little softer. He like feels very grandfatherly in that final scene. That is so
Yeah,
impressive, given the fact that like he had to play a younger version earlier on. I think that's so impressive when actors are able to stretch that range and not need like younger actors to play younger versions of themselves. So I think
yes,
it's funny that was going to be my main talking point, and that's what you said for James Dean because the
yeah,
both of them do such a good job in showing that progression. But I think he's just got a really tough arc, and I've always just kind of viewed Rock Hudson as like that movie star. I knew him more for his story of being gay and dying of AIDS, and like having that like
oh
being one of those very
wow,
very first high profile closeted actors. But I think it's really cool that like I can now know him for his work and like really appreciating his craft and what he did as an actor. So
man, that's
yeah,
so. I didn't even know that about his story. So
yeah,
such a sad thing because he was so good in that movie.
hmm
I totally am 100% behind your pick there. I
hmm
was it was tough because I was like James Dean, Dennis Hopper, Rock Hudson, Anthony Perkins. I was like, so
yeah.
many
I mean,
good
even
ones.
Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner
Yes,
for two
yeah,
roles. Yul Brynner was in 2 movies and did great in both of them.
yeah. How did I not? Because when I was watching Ten Commandments, I was like probably gonna pick Charlton Heston. He's great in this. And then I was like, oh my god, so many good, great male
Yeah.
performances.
Yeah. But I'm first for the women. Seems like such a basic pick, but none of the women performances in these movies I felt like really, really shown, except for one, which is the one I'm going to pick, and that is Elizabeth Taylor.
Mhm.
It's a revolving door right now. She's won quite a lot of these. I believe this is
Oh
maybe
yeah,
her fourth. Um, but she's great, and I think she's great in this movie. She is probably the least showy of the 3 leads, but I think she still needs to function in a certain way, and have a certain manner about her to really sell the themes home. And I think I love those moments of tender romance, but also when she is able to kind of stick it to him and be progressive. I think I like her character a lot, and her performance is very good, very serviceable. It's not her best performance by any means, I think, but it is one of her better characters. So
yeah.
I think she gets to do a lot more with Virginia Woolf in other films, but I think she still is great in this film and deserves her accolades because honestly, I mean, Around the World in 80 Days doesn't really have many women at all. There's maybe 1 or 2, but the other films just no one really stuck out as like I need to give them the win. I'm
Yeah.
curious who you pick because there's another one that I was teetering with, but ultimately I went with Elizabeth Taylor just because I think she was more well rounded. But I think
Yeah,
you're gonna pick the other one, but we'll see.
maybe. I don't know who you're talking about. But yeah, with when I was watching Giant and I was watching Elizabeth Taylor, I was like, all right, I'm probably gonna pick Elizabeth Taylor because I didn't know like who was going first for what.
Mhm.
But if I had gone first, I definitely would have gone Elizabeth Taylor as well. So that was the right pick because when she goes in there and she's like challenging him and stuff like that, I was like, oh man, she's the best. Like,
Yeah,
we loved her in Virginia Woolf and now this. Yeah, there's a reason why she's so
absolutely.
highly touted from us.
Mhm.
One of the great actresses. I initially had one person, and then I was already teetering, and then you told me about a fact, and then I was like, all right, I'm picking someone else because I think this other person actually speaks more. I was initially thinking about Deborah Kerr from The King and I,
Oh,
or
okay.
Kurt from King and I. And then
Oh,
you were
but then
like,
I told you she didn't sing.
she doesn't sing, and I was like, I was already on the fence. She was like, she's a woman in a movie, so I was like, she's not the best, but she's not bad.
Yeah,
I
definitely
kind
an
of like
option
the
because she is the
performance.
lead of her. She's the only lead of her movie. I feel like all these other movies are
Yeah,
male led, so she's the lead of
yeah.
that movie.
I kind of think of Elizabeth Taylor as a big
Yeah,
lead in Giant
like
too,
a co-lead. Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, of the three, yeah. But yeah, but then I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go Dorothy McGuire from Friendly Persuasion.
Oh, okay. Not where I
Yeah,
thought you were gonna go. Yeah.
yeah, because she's the mom in the movie. She's the Quaker woman,
Mhm.
and I love how she. Maybe you thought I was going to Ten Commandments or something,
Yeah, I thought you
but
were going Ann Baxter because I know you loved her in All About Eve. But
yeah, she's definitely
yeah,
great. But yeah, Dorothy McGuire. As I was talking about, like with her performance of perfecting that turn to the camera, her back on her, something that's going on behind her, with all her convictions, and like she's got those tears in her eye because she's acting like on all of her like convictions and beliefs, and she feels so strongly about certain things, and then gets challenged, and I feel like she really sells that well. Like at the end, her desperation when she's got to go save that goose, and she's like, that's a pet,
yeah,
like I don't want violence, but and I showed you guys the perfect like hospitality, but this is the last straw. Broom slap, kind of a deal. And then how bad she feels about hitting the guy with the broom, even though she shouldn't. Those people were the worst, like terrorizing the family and their animals and stuff, and just hated them so much, and they showed them so much compassion. Anyways, yeah, that's a great performance too, and
yeah.
I think we did a good job with the acting here.
Yes, we did, and I do have some announcements to make in a sec involving that. But let's first recap, and then I will give my special announcements. But our best prizes: my best actor is Rock Hudson for Giant, Chad's is James Dean for Giant, my best actress is Elizabeth Taylor for Giant, and Chad's best actress is Dorothy McGuire for Friendly Persuasion, and our best picture is Giant, and we have two people joining the Hall of Fame this episode, which is very exciting. Elizabeth Taylor was already in. She was winning for In the Place, A Place in the Sun, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and Virginia Woolf. So now she gets her fourth, and it's still not over because Cleopatra is still around the corner, and Cleopatra
Ooh.
is actually the record for the longest Oscar nominee of all time. So
Oh
we'll
yeah.
get to that eventually. But Dorothy McGuire, who I gave the award to for Gentleman's Agreement way, way, way back when in 1947, has now
Whoa.
won her second. So she was in Gentleman's Agreement, and now she is here. She is winning her second. So she joins the Hall of Fame. And George Stevens, having directed now two of our winners, Place in the Sun and Giant, also joins our Hall of Fame for directors, which is really, really cool. So we got a lot of notable names here. I don't know how many more Oscar nominees Rock Hudson will be in, so I don't know if he'll ever get into the Hall of Fame, but
Yeah.
a very widely regarded crop of names here. So I'm very happy that we were able to give them their due. Any last thoughts on 56, Chad?
Very long slate, but I enjoyed about half of it.
Yeah, there you go. I would say I enjoyed three of them for sure. Yeah, so like
about
2.5.
7 hours of the 14 I enjoyed.
Yes, there you go. I love to hear that. Yeah, our longest slate, but one of our shorter videos, just because we have time crunches and stuff. But thank you all for watching this one. We do have to tease our next month, and it is spooky season coming around the corner. So we had to pick something that had at least some sort of spooky tinge. There was also an upset that has a spooky tinge, and there's a film by one of the greats, William Shakespeare. There's a ghost, so it counts. The Ghost of Hamlet. But it is Hamlet. Hamlet won the 1948 Oscar. It was an upset over the Treasure of the Sierra Madre. So we're going to talk about that upset. And we are going to talk about that slate, which is Hamlet, as I said. Watch the right one. There's so many out there. Also, Hamnet is coming out a month later. So this is going to be a good precursor to watch Hamlet. So it's fresh in our brains when we're watching Hamnet, which is the origin story of Hamlet, which is cool. But we're going to be talking about Hamlet, Johnny Belinda, The Red Shoes, The Snake Pit, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. So I have not seen any of those. I've seen scenes of the Laurence Olivier Hamlet. I've also heard things about The Red Shoes and The Treasure of Sierra Madre. The other two I have not heard a thing about. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to watch this slate, also because it's shorter, so it's going to be easier to squeeze in. Because I'm also going to be doing my 31 Days of Halloween very soon, where I'm having friends and family pick the movies, which is really, really exciting. But some of those movies are shorter than others. Some of them are short films, so I'll be able to actually like watch these films as well, and hopefully Chad and I can get recording this and get it out to you by the end of October. But thank you so much for tuning into this one. Chad, what do you think of the slate next month? Are you excited for 1948?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually already started watching it a little bit. Like I started watching Hamlet, and it definitely does have a spooky tinge to it.
Cool.
And also, I was looking through kind of like the slate, and it looks like a lot of like psychological drama thriller stuff coming from some of these. So I think we picked a pretty good one for October.
Yeah,
so
we were originally
I'm excited.
behind the curtain. We were originally going to go with a different slate that had a overt horror movie, but it was 10 movies long, and just with where I am and now the cruise, and we wanted to have a guest on it. We figured we'll push that and record it another time, just because I wanted to get that guest on, and I also want to make sure we have, we only have so much time here while I have my boat life. But thank you guys so much for watching this one. Very exciting. We'll see you next month for 48. Chad, where can they find you elsewhere? And tease some Halloween stuff because it's coming up. I want people to know where to find you for Halloween stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, check me out on watch more Picture This, but also check out my channel Cinema Chad, where we go through a lot of different stuff. I do reviews sometimes on there. My wife and I are trying to review a lot of the physical media that's behind me. Also, we're doing like Buffy the Vampire Slayer reviews, which is my favorite, our favorite show of all time, me and my wife. And also a spooky show. So there you go. There's a spooky fix. And then also we do a lot of rankings. Dylan's been on there a lot. Ranking stuff and having fun. There's some horrors on there. And speaking of horror, I have my other channel, Welcome to Primetime, that I have with my wife and my buddy Hunter, that we just talk about horror movies a lot. We've talked about Buffy. I got Hunter into Buffy, and we enjoy talking about that and a lot of other horror stuff. And we are about to, I think we'll probably have announced this by the time this comes out. But we're doing our 31 days of Halloween, or 31 days of primetime, where we kind of do it like a roundup style, where we'll release a video that has like 6 mini reviews of us talking about like 6 horror movies, instead of doing like one per day or anything like that. It's a lot of great discussion, a lot of great movies. We're doing it through the decades. Yeah. So from the 30s to the 20s. So if you like that kind of style of talking about horror through the decades, definitely check out our 31 days of primetime and other stuff on the channel. And I don't know, check out Letterboxd and all that stuff.
Very cool. Yes. Thank you, Chad. As always, you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo on Letterboxd. I'm finally wrapping up the retrospective next month. I promise. I'm just getting all the reviews wrapped up. It was a busy month. Surprisingly, just a lot of people visiting the boat. October, I don't really have anyone coming on the boat, so I'm gonna kind of take it as a watch horror movies, spend time with my friends and family, or friends on board, but also catch up with family at home through this. And then catch up on the channel and like really get those final retrospective videos up. TikToks will be happening, maybe not daily, but I'm going to try my best to get them out there for the 31 days of Halloween. I'm not sure what the format will be entirely, but I have had, as I said, 31 friends and family writing in, sending videos in, telling me what to watch. So they're going to be able to pick my movies for me. You will not know what the movies are until they're happening. So very, very exciting. But thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll see you next month for 1948. Woo, spooky season Hamlet. We're very excited. But thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
The Oscar goes to
Around the world in 80 days.
What are you doing? He can come down the stairs all by himself now. You should tell Dylan who's on your shirt.
Is that Big Bird?
Yeah, cookies. All right, come on, bud.
Are you taking that with you?
You give Daddy his hat?
It's gonna disappear mid-edit. Are you sure? Bye, buddy. Have fun at daycare. Love you.